mention a friend of Zev, which is maybe the most important description. Friend of Zev Schwartz and a friend of Phil and Faggy. So good
you have
morning to
something with
everyone.
the Schwartzes.
Yes, something that's the common denominator. So I would like to deal with the topic that actually could sound strange because that's the essence of this month. But when you talk to people, really this topic, especially to youngsters, this topic is actually scary, if not to say terrifying. People are afraid of Chodesh Elul. People basically are afraid to deal with Tshuva. And I could share with you an anecdote. Many years ago, I arrived to one of the religious high schools, to an ulpana for girls. They dedicated a whole night to deal with the topic of Tshuva. And I put the question in the following way. Why don't we want to do Tshuva? And I got basically 4 answers. I would distinguish between the 4 answers, and I would divide them to 4 basic groups. One answer said the assumption that stands behind the question is wrong. We are not afraid to deal with Tshuva. We love to do Tshuva. It's not true. The assumption of the question is wrong. The second answer was, it's true, we don't want to deal with Tshuva, but the answer is not because we are afraid of Tshuva, but because we don't need to do Tshuva. Tshuva applies to others, to those who are secular, to those who are Haredim, to those who are this, not to us. I must admit that this kind of answers, there were very few that said this kind of answers. But the major 2 groups that agreed with the assumption of the question, why are we afraid, answered 2 different answers that basically are the same. One group said, you know why we are afraid from Tshuva? Because we know what it will demand from us. We know what we are now. We know what Torah demands us to do or to be. We know how Bal Tshuva looks like. We don't want to be Baalei Tshuva, because this means that we will have to change our identity. We know what we are. We know where we sin. But this is a part of our life. And we don't want to change it. We don't want to change our identity. The second answer, although it was not the same, but basically it's almost the same. We don't know how we will look like if we will go into this journey of Tshuva. We know what we are now. We like our identity. We like our behavior, more or less. We know that we make mistakes, but we like ourselves. We don't know how we'll look like if we'll do Tshuva. The first part of this shiur, I want to justify these 2 answers that actually seem to be the biggest challenge of this month of Tshuva. What does it mean to do tshuva? How does it work? What is the rationale behind tshuva? I mean, if you are indicted to court because you have stolen, because you have lied, because you have murdered, because you have done something wrong, and then you will come to the judge and you will tell him, well, okay, it's true, I admit, but I'm ready to confess, I'm ready to regret, I'm ready to accept upon myself that I will never do it again. All these issues will be taken in consideration by the judge when he will decide whether to send us to 2 years of prison or 10 years of prison. But it will never be an element or component in the decision whether I'm guilty or not. If I admitted that I murdered, if I admitted that I've thieved, I will be judged as guilty, as somebody that is wrong, as somebody that has to be punished. Maybe I will get a reduction in the amount of money I will have to pay, in the amount of compensation that I will have to give, in the years that I will have to sit in prison. But it will never be instead of punishing. Such a thing as tshuva does not exist in the secular rationale of the legal system. So what makes it legitimate in our system, in the Jewish system, which has to be a rational system? 4 things. Mekarim gzar dino shel adam. Change the decision, the psak din, that Hashem has judged a person. What are the 4 things? Shinui Hashem, he has to change his name. Shinui makom, he has to change his place. What does it mean? Why does he have to change his name? Why does he have to change the place? The answer is very simple. The Rambam explains. What's the idea of tshuva? We say to the Ribbono Shel Olam, we are not the one that have sinned. It's true that yesterday I was doing something wrong, but this is somebody else. His name was
Harav Stav, you put yourself on mute. Harav Stav.
I do not want to, okay. The idea behind tshuva is that I'm saying to Hashem, it's not me that sinned. I changed my name, just like a sick person adds a name, Chaim or Raphael or whatever, to say to the Hashem, the psak din that was given that somebody has to die, and therefore he became sick, does not relate to me because I'm not the same person. I'm not the one. You remember me from the address here and here. It's not me anymore. I don't live there anymore. I changed my place. I changed my name. That's the idea of changing name. I could tell you stories about people. I remember one family in Shoham that when I asked the family, why do they move from Shoham to another place? The woman gave me an answer. I want to start a new way of behavior. And I could not do that here. So if I want to change my identity, I want to change perceived in society, I need to play. Student knows that The better way to do it is to go to a different school where the teachers do not get the history and the records of the boy from the teachers of last year. He moves to another school where he finds new friends, new teachers, and he could start from the beginning. That's the essence of changing a place. I'm not the same person. Changing name is the same idea. The idea, I remember one of my friends, actually is also a relative, family relative. We used to call him Rami. His name was Avraham, but we used to call him Rami. And then he went to yeshiva and he said to his family and to his friends, please, I don't want anymore you to call me Rami. This is a Zionist name. I want you to call me Avraham. That's a Jewish name. He felt that the word Rami related to or represented or symbolized something about his identity. And he wanted to change his name. So that's the idea of tshuva. We change our identity. There is a very famous story about Rabbi Shmuel HaNagid. Rabbi Shmuel HaNagid was the minister of treasure in Spain, in Granada, in Spain. So the story says that he went one day with a king to the market, as it was very common in those days. So he went with his king to the market, and they meet a merchant there, and the king asks the merchant, how is it doing? What's going on? And how is the minister of treasure? And the guy started to curse Rabbi Shmuel HaNagid. And he said he's corrupted, and he's a crook, and he's a bad man, and doesn't behave himself. So the king asked Rabbi Shmuel HaNagid, why does he say these terrible words against you? And Rabbi Shmuel HaNagid said, look, this guy is from the mafia here. He puts his store in the middle of the street. He doesn't clean. He doesn't pay taxes in time. So therefore, he behaves in this. Therefore, he curses all time the representatives of the government. So the king became very mad, and he demanded from Rabbi Shmuel HaNagid to cut his tongue of this man. By the way, this was a punishment that was very common in those days. So he said to him, you have to cut his tongue. Half a year later, Rabbi Shmuel HaNagid and the king go to another visit. And they meet this merchant. So the king asks the merchant, no, the government, our things. And says, amazing, righteous person, such a good neshama, a good soul, amazing, full of kindness, full of mercy, and such a sensitive guy. So the king turns to Rabbi Shmuel HaNagid and says to him, didn't I ask you to cut his tongue? How could he speak? How could he talk? And Rabbi Shmuel HaNagid said to him, of course, that's exactly what I've done to him. You remember what a dirty mouth he had? What dirty words he used a year ago or half a year ago? I cut his bad tongue and I planted instead a good tongue. That's actually the essence of tshuva, the story. We don't have to change the body. We don't have to kill him. We just have to change the identity. We have to change the character. We have to change the name. We have to change the behavior. And actually, by doing this, we could say it's a different person. As the Rambam says, etmol, yesterday, this guy was shakutz. It was disgusting. And he was hated by God. But now, he's so beloved. He's so nice. Yesterday, God didn't want to hear from him. He never listened to his prayers. But now, he's a different person. He's so accepted. He's so welcomed, is so overwhelmed and so embraced by Hashem. It's a different person. There's only one problem with this tremendous idea. Most people do not want to change their identity. Most people are not ready to change their names. Most people are not ready to move with their apartment, from their property to another property. Most people are scared to do that. And they don't want to change their identity. They know exactly what it means, and they don't want to change identity. And I will tell you more than that. When we say every day, 3 times a day, does it mean that we will change our names 3 times a day? Does it mean that we'll have to move from our apartment 3 times a day? Everybody that moved once, knows what a headache is that. So do we expect us to move 3 times a day? Let's go to the second answer. I know what I am now. I'm afraid of how I will look like if I will be something different. If I'll do tshuva. I want you to know that the concern of being scared from the unknown identity is sometimes much worse than knowing even what is there in the final stop. Because the identity is the most terrifying for people. Many times ask ourselves why people didn't escape from Europe in the 30s. They saw already the Kristallnacht. They saw in 1933 how Hitler, Ymach Shemo, is getting in power. They saw all this. I remember my father, blessed his memory, used to tell me, he remembers how Jabotinsky came in Poland. He went from shul to shul and yelled to the Jews, Bruders, run away from here. The fire is coming. Run away. So why didn't Jews escape? Why didn't all the Jews escape? In the time they could escape. So one of the answers is the Rebbes were afraid because of Zionism, because they would become secular. This is only a partly answer, because there were many Jews that already were not frum and did not escape. Why didn't they escape? The answer is very simple. For most people, the most terrible situation that they are used to or that they know is better for them than uncertainty. The scare from the unknown is in many times more frightening than the evil that exists and that surrounds you in the place you are. How do I know that? We will all recite these verses in Rosh Hashanah that will come in 2.5 weeks. One of the very famous verses that we love to sing. כה אמר השם, זכרתי לך חסד נעורייך, אהבת כלולותייך. I remember your kindness when you were young. I remember your love when we were engaged. לכתך אחריי במדבר, בארץ לא זרועה. I will never forget that you went after me, that you followed me to the deserts, and you showed your love to me, and you were ready to leave Egypt and to follow me, be'eretz lo zruah, in an unplanted land. What's going on? Usually we know that we have to praise and to express our gratitude to Hashem because He redeemed us from Egypt. But in this verse, the prophet Yirmiyahu says to us, Hashem is grateful to us that we were ready to follow him. What's going on? Because to be in the place you are, even though you are a slave, even though you work so hard for the Egyptians that torture you and throw your kids to the Nile and kill you, it's still better than to go to the unknown desert where you don't know what to expect there. זכרתי לך חסד נעורייך, אהבת כלולותייך, לכתך אחריי במדבר, בארץ לא זרועה. I could understand so easy why people are afraid to go to a journey that a part of this is the uncertainty of identity. To which identity? I know what I am now. How will I look like in 2 weeks, in a month, if I'm really going into this journey of tshuva? I know what I am, and I like my identity. I have problems, but I like what I am. Do I know how will I look like in the future? I'm afraid. So therefore, I don't want to go into this journey. I remember before the disengagement, I don't know how many from you were in Israel at that time, talking about 2006, 2005. The terror attacks, there was one of the settlements in the Gaza Strip. Its name
Stav, we can't hear you. Stav. Hold on, I'm getting hold of him. Shalom Arav, אתה על מיוט.
I don't know where I was cut, but
from
if I will repeat.
The Yishuv in Gush Katif, you're about to tell a story. There was a terror attack in a Yishuv in Gush Katif.
It's an amazing story. So Netzarim, in order to enter to Netzarim, you needed to go
for the Rab.
Okay, sometimes it even required to go there by helicopters. So Psagot invited the kids of Netzarim to come for a weekend to Psagot. So they made a Asefat Horim. They gathered all the parents, assembly of the parents, to respond. So the secretary of the kibbutz asked who agrees. And everybody raises his finger, said, yes, I'm ready to send my kids there for a weekend. One finger was raised and said, no, I don't want to. So he was asked why. So he said, I'm afraid of my kid, of the security. So people asked him, are you kidding us? We are living in the most dangerous place in the universe. Terror attacks every day. We need to go with tanks, and you are afraid to send your kid to Psagot? And he said to them, yes, and I will explain you why. You know what's the difference between Psagot and Netzarim? Terrorists are near Psagot and terrorists are near Netzarim. The murders of Netzarim I'm familiar with. I know exactly when I go to this corner, I know the guy that will throw a stone. I know the guy that will shoot. I know exactly where to expect them. The terrorists and the murders of Ramallah, of Netzarim, I'm not familiar with. I'm afraid of the uncertainty. With what I'm familiar with, I'm used to. I'm getting used to. What is not familiar to me, what is not expected, I'm afraid. So that's exactly what this girl said. We are afraid of the uncertainty of tshuva. So if we summarize these two answers, there is a big reason to be afraid of tshuva. Or you need to change your identity to something that you are not familiar with, that you don't know how it will look like, or you know exactly how it will look like. And that's exactly what you don't want to change. That's exactly what you don't want to be. And I think these two issues are the biggest issues that push away people from doing tshuva. Especially when we come to the age of being 50, 60, 70, we know what we are, we know what we are not, and we say, okay, we are what we are, and tshuva is not for us, because we don't want to change this identity. What I will try to explain and to show in the next couple of minutes, that with all the respect to what the Rambam was saying about tshuva, about saying yesterday he was beloved, he was hated, and now he's beloved. Yesterday his name was this, and now his name is that. This is one way of tshuva. This is not the regular tshuva. This is what Rav Kook defines as tshuva pitomit, as a sudden tshuva, as a process of tshuva that is done based on storms, on historical events, happy or sad events, traumatic events that changed people from one way to another and makes people to change identities. This is one way of tshuva. But when the Torah taught us to do tshuva, this is not what the Torah meant about tshuva. When the Torah teaches us about the need of doing tshuva, and when our sages taught us and educated us to do tshuva, they didn't mean changing identity. It happens sometimes, but this is not the main track, the main trail of tshuva. In order to explain that, I'll try to use an idea from Agadah Shel Pesach. So for the next 5 minutes, please listen to a vote from Agadah Shel Pesach. I guess everybody knows the paragraph I will refer to. And I guess many of us asked themselves the question. I don't know what the answer they gave to them. After we recite all the Agadah, we say the following. לפיכך אנחנו חייבים להודות ולהלל ולשבח. Because אילו לא הוציאנו משם, if Rabbi Shalom wouldn't have saved us, wouldn't have redeemed us, then anu uvanenu, we and our kids and our descendants, anu uvanenu היינו משועבדים לפרעה. We would have still be the slaves of Pharaoh in Mitzrayim. And the very famous question is, who said that if we wouldn't have been redeemed then, 3,500 years ago? Who said that we would have been still slaves of Pharaoh until now in Mitzrayim? He wouldn't redeem us then. He would redeem us. He would have redeemed us 10 years later, 50 years later. Why does the Agada say, why is it so clear to the Agada, to the one that wrote the Agada Shel Pesach, that if we were not being redeemed then, must have been that we would have continued to be slaves until these days? So the rabbis that raised this question said usually the following answer. As we know, there are 50 levels of Tum'ah, 50 Sha'arei Tum'ah, and we arrived already to the 49th great stage of Tum'ah. And if we were not been redeemed then, we wouldn't gone even deeper to the 50th level of Tum'ah. And if we would arrive to the 50th level of Tum'ah, Rabbi Shalom couldn't from that level. That's in the Agada. We must praise and thank and express our gratitude to Hashem that redeemed us, because if He wouldn't redeem us then, we were so close to the 50th gate of Tum'ah, and we arrived to the 50th gate, then it was already a lost case. He couldn't redeem us from that terrible level, low level, deep level of Tum'ah. That's what the rabbis usually answer. And now comes the following question. Comes the Ishbitzer Rebbe, actually the Radziner Rebbe, the son of the Ishbitzer, and he asks the following question. What's going on? Ribono Shel Olam can change the entire world, can turn the world upside down. It could make 10 plagues. It could turn 200 plagues, according to the Agada. 200 makot al Yam Suf. He could do whatever he wants. He couldn't take us from the 50th gate of Tum'ah. He could do everything, but this he could not do. What do you mean? He wouldn't be able to take us from Sha'ar HaTum'ah 50, the same one that could redeem us from the 49th Madrega of Tum'ah, could do the same thing with the 50th Madrega of Tum'ah. What's the difference? What's the big deal for him? And that's an amazing question that the Radziner Rebbe raises. He says, what's the pshat in this paragraph that we all keep on saying every year? We won't arrive to he won't redeem us then, he would redeem us 2 years later. What's the problem? We would have go lower to the 50th Madrega, so he would save us from the 50th Madrega of Tum'ah. What's the big deal? And now he comes to he gives a great answer. And he says the following. You know what's the difference between 49 and 50? Of course, the same God that saved us from the 49th level could save us from the 50th level. That's not the issue. The one that created the world and can do whatever he wants in the world could save us. There's one thing that they couldn't do. What is the difference between the 49th Madrega and the 50th Madrega? The 49th level of Tumah means that we are still the same people, we are still in the same, we carry the same identity, but we went very far. We went very far from our original destination, from our original planned behavior. We went so bad, we were behaved so bad, we went so far from the original way we were supposed to. To go to the 50th level means, of course, he could redeem us. But this will require a brainwash. This will require taking us from Egypt, but it's already a different person. It's a different identity. It's to take somebody that has already no connection to the original identity that he was before. And Hashem promised to Avraham Avinu, Ger yeh zaracha be'eretz lo lahem. Your descendants will be foreign, will be strange. Be'eretz lo lahem, va'avadum, and they will work for them, they will be slaves. Ve'inu otam, they will be tortured by them. Ve'achrechen yetzu be'chush gadol. But afterwards, they will come out with good, with a lot of properties, with a lot of goods. He promised Abraham Avinu that the descendants of his will come out from Egypt and they will remember that they are the descendants of Abraham Avinu. Pakod yifkod Elokim etchem. Because Hashem promised to Abraham not only the biological descendants will come out from Egypt, the biological and the people that remember that they are the grandchildren of Avraham Avinu will come out from Egypt. Because the main track of redemption is not to wash the brains of people and to make them a different personality. The main challenge of mankind is to remain the same identity and to move forward and to make a progress. The main challenge of tshuva is not changing identity, is to continue with your identity and to improve. And therefore, when we talk about tshuva, we do not talk about changing identity. We talk about the identity we are identified with and we like, and we should ask ourselves, do what we do according to what we believe, according to what we understand that our identity is about. Do we fulfill what we really expect from ourselves? Ribono Shel Olam will never ask us, why didn't you do what other people believe you should do? Ribono Shel Olam will ask us, did you do what you believed you should do? When we look in our mirror and we'll ask ourselves, are we satisfied from what are we doing? Not from a different identity that we don't want to look like, but from the identity we expect from ourselves. This is our challenge. In order to do that, there is no need to change our identity. There is no need to change name. There is no need to change the place of living. There is only one need, to look at ourselves and to ask ourselves, is our behavior fits to our ideology? What's the distance between what we expect from ourselves and the way we behave? This is what should be asked, not what identity we think that we should change to. That's not the question. The question is, we know what our identity is about, but are we fulfilling what we expect from ourselves? And therefore, if that's the question, tshuva is about a total different thing. And Rav Kook dedicates to that kind of tshuva. If the first type of tshuva was defined, was given a name, tshuva pitomit, a sudden tshuva, a tshuva that comes as a result of a crisis, of a trauma, of something that happened suddenly and that shakes people's identity. The second type of tshuva is called tshuva hadragatit. Hadragatit means step by step. We don't ask you to change identity. We ask you, do you do what you want, what you expect from yourself to do? There is an amazing story I would like to share with you, an amazing story, a lot of stories I would like to share with you too. One story is about Agnon. Agnon describes this story in one of his very, very nice stories. And I don't know if you know, the rabbis, or many rabbis, teach us that to make Birkat Hamazon, to do it not by heart, but to read it from the Birkon, to read it from the bencher, from the Sidur, not by heart. And many rabbis say that it's good for many things. But Agnon describes how somebody wrote a letter to his friend, and he taught him that since he started to recite Birkat Hamazon from a bencher, he started to notice what he's saying, and to understand what he's saying, and to pay attention to what he's saying. Not always, not to every word, but sometimes to some words. And Agnon describes how one sends a letter. He describes that he fell in love with a German girl, a non-Jewish girl. And his friend, and he sends a letter to his friend, and he shares with him that he fell in love. He lives in Germany, and he fell in love with this non-Jewish girl. And the friend responds to him. He didn't give him mussar, he didn't give him nothing. But he says to him, you know, I heard from one of my rabbis that it's good for Jewish identity to make Birkat Hamazon from Siddur. His friend is going out with a shikse. He's going to get married with a goya. And he says, you know, it's better, it's good to make Birkat Hamazon from Siddur. So the story of Agnon describes how the friend gets the letter. And he says, okay, if his friend says to him that it's good to make Birkat Hamazon from the Siddur, so he will do that. So it was Erev Yom Kippur. And he made Sudam of Seket. And he said to himself, well, now I have to make Birkat Hamazon. And then he arrived to the words in Shelo Nevosh Velo Nikalem. And he started to think about the words Shelo Nevosh Velo Nikalem. And he said to himself, well, what am I doing? How will I look? How will I be perceived by my parents? How will I be perceived by others? Is this decision that I'm going to do to get married to this Goya, will it add honor to me, to the family, or not? Eventually, after saying this Birkat Hamazon, he decided to finish his connection with this girl. I'm not saying that Birkat Hamazon will always bring to these results. What I'm saying is that sometimes small decisions make great impact. And small decision to say Birkat to somebody that doesn't want to make Birkat Hamazon, okay, it doesn't make. But if you make Birkat Hamazon, and if you belong to the group of people that do Birkat Hamazon, So to say Birkat Hamazon from Sidur, it's not something that is against your values. It's not something that changes your identity. It's just a part of you, what you believe. You decided that Birkat Hamazon is a part of your values. It's not somebody else's that decided that. So do it like people should do Birkat Hamazon. So say it loud. Say it with a siddur. And then all of a sudden you'll realize that once you pay attention to the words you're saying, maybe they will sound different. Maybe you'll behave different. Here's another story. The Stipler, the father of Reb Chaim Kanievsky, it was a big masmid, very, very big masmid. I went to him once, I remember. And the story says the following. A koilenik from Nebra came over to the Stipler and said to him, look, I know it's in the yeshivas, they say every Yom Kippur you should accept upon yourself something to the new year. So I wanted to accept upon myself, and I want to consult with the Rav if this acceptance is something that makes sense. So I asked him, what is the thing that you want to be mekabel in yourself? So he said to him, look, I'm a koilenik. I learn every day in the morning and in the afternoon. I wanted to accept upon myself that I will not speak in other issues during the Seder of the afternoon, between 3 to 6. I will not speak divrei chol. So the Stipler said to him, no, that doesn't make sense. So I said to him, why? So I said, listen what you say to yourself. 3 hours, you want to accept yourself, upon yourself, that you will not speak in other issues. It's not human. It's not something that people could, it doesn't make sense to me. So the Stipler said to him, so what? So he asked him, what should I be mekabel upon myself? So he said, you know what? Decide to yourself that the first 10 minutes, you will not talk to nobody. 10 minutes, that's all. You want to be a koilenik. 10 minutes, decide to yourself that you will not talk about other issues. That's something that makes sense. That's something that is in your level. Don't accept upon yourself things that you will not be able to stand behind it and to stick to them. And then you'll say to yourself, how you see, tshuva is impossible. Do things that fit to your level. Accept upon yourself things that you really believe that you could commit yourself to them, that will be in the level that you believe you should be, and will not give you the feeling that you change yourself to something that is not you. Strengthen your identity. Don't change it. Do things that you really believe that fit to your ideology, that you'll be able to look at the mirror in the end of every day and to say, well, I've done what I really believe I should. That's actually the essence of the main track, the main path of tshuva. What Rav Kook says, what Rav Kook defines as tshuva hadragatit. So have a Shana Tova to everyone. Thank you so much for listening. Upon my apology for the cutting of the connection twice or 3 times in the way. Litraot and Shana Tova to everyone.
Shana Tova.
תודה, כבוד הרב.